The desperate broadcast. The warning sirens tore through the silence of Kepler 9 mining station like the cry of a dying star. Captain Zareth of the Vrelnath Collective pressed his six-fingered hands against the command console, feeling the vibrations of each impact through the metal. His silvery skin had turned pale gray, the way it always did when his people experienced extreme stress. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, their movements precise despite the chaos erupting outside the viewport. The Krell Dominion had arrived without warning. 12 warships, each one a brutal construction of dark metal and aggressive angles, had dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge just 3 hours ago. They had ignored every attempt at communication, every plea for negotiation. Instead, they had simply opened fire on the automated defense satellites that protected the mining operation. Those satellites, designed to deflect asteroids and solar debris, had been obliterated in minutes. Zareth watched the tactical display with growing dread. The Krell ships moved with predatory efficiency, forming a containment sphere around Kepler 9. They were not here to raid or to make demands. They were here to conquer, to take the station and everything it represented. The mining outpost processed rare elements crucial for faster-than-light travel. Control of Kepler 9 would give the Krell Dominion a strategic advantage over this entire sector. Navigation Officer Telvan looked up from his station, his bioluminescent spots flickering with agitation. The display cast strange shadows across his elongated features. "Captain, shields are down to 37%. At this rate of bombardment, we have perhaps 90 minutes before they breach the hull." Zareth's mind raced through tactical options, but he knew the truth. The Vrelnath were not warriors. They were traders, miners, diplomats. Their civilization had thrived for 3,000 years precisely because they had learned to negotiate rather than fight. But negotiation required a willing partner, and the Krell had already demonstrated their answer to any peace talks. Communications Officer Lissa suddenly straightened at her console, her crystalline fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "Captain, I am attempting to send a priority distress signal to the collective defense fleet, but there is a problem. The main communications array has been damaged. I can route through secondary systems, but the encrypted channels are completely offline." Zareth moved to her station, studying the diagnostic readouts. "Can you repair it?" Lissa's expression darkened. "Not in time. The damage is extensive. However, I can broadcast on the old universal emergency frequency. It is primitive technology, but the transmitter is still functional." The universal frequency. Zareth remembered learning about it in his academy days, back when the galaxy seemed so much larger and more dangerous. It was a relic from the early days of space exploration, before the collective had formed, before civilizations had learned to work together. A simple mathematical language that any species with radio technology could theoretically understand, but nobody used it anymore. It was beneath the dignity of advanced civilizations. "Do it," Zareth ordered. "Broadcast our situation and coordinates. Someone might be listening." Lissa hesitated. "Captain, you understand that frequency reaches into the unfiltered zones, the quarantine sectors, the death worlds." "Yes," Zareth said quietly, "I know." Another explosion rocked the station. Through the massive viewport that dominated the bridge, Zareth could see one of the Krell warships moving closer, its weapons ports glowing with building energy. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of Kepler 9 itself, covered in armor plating that seemed to absorb light. The Krell had been expanding their territory for the past 20 years, growing more aggressive with each conquest. The collective had tried diplomatic solutions, trade agreements, even cultural exchanges. Nothing had worked. The Krell respected only strength, and the Vrelnath had very little of that to offer. Engineering Chief Bulrix's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, I am evacuating non-essential personnel to the emergency shuttles, but even if they launch, the Krell ships will intercept them before they reach the jump point. We need help to arrive soon or everyone here will be lost." Zareth closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every life on this station. 473 souls. Scientists, engineers, miners, their families, all depending on him to make the impossible happen. Lissa worked her console, routing power from damaged systems to boost the signal strength. The distress call pulsed out into the void, riding electromagnetic waves across the vast distances between stars. It was a simple message, translated into the mathematical language of the universal frequency. Emergency. Under attack. Coordinates attached. Immediate assistance required. The signal spread outward at the speed of light, carrying its desperate plea into the darkness of space. It passed through the territories of a dozen minor species, most of whom no longer monitored such primitive frequencies. It swept past ancient relay stations that had been abandoned centuries ago, and it continued outward, reaching farther and farther from the civilized core of the galaxy, into regions that the Vrelnath Collective had marked on their charts with warnings and restrictions. Into the quarantine zones where dangerous species were contained for the safety of all. 51 light-years away, in a star system on the outer rim of known space, the signal finally found an audience. The Europa listening station orbited Jupiter's ice-covered moon, one of dozens of monitoring facilities that humanity had built during their long isolation. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was on the night shift, which in the perpetual darkness of Europa's orbit meant very little beyond the clock on the wall. She had been reading through maintenance reports, half listening to the steady hiss of cosmic background radiation that filled the speakers. When the alert sounded, Sarah nearly dropped her coffee. In 3 years of working at the listening station, she had never heard that particular alarm. She stared at the console in disbelief as data began streaming across her screens. The computer had detected a signal on the ancient universal emergency frequency, a band that humanity still monitored out of a combination of habit and paranoia. Sarah's hands moved automatically, routing the signal through analysis protocols, but her mind was already racing ahead to the implications. The message was unmistakable. Someone was calling for help. The coordinates placed the source deep in Vrelnath Collective territory. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The Vrelnath, the species that had made first contact with humanity 63 years ago, sparked hope for galactic partnership, and then promptly declared Earth a restricted zone. She had studied the history in academy. Every human who worked in space communications knew the story by heart. The Vrelnath had arrived with diplomatic pleasantries and scientific curiosity. They had scanned Earth, studied human physiology, analyzed the planet's conditions, and then they had fled, horrified by what they found. Earth was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, the highest danger rating in the Vrelnath system. The gravity that humans considered normal would slowly crush most Vrelnath under their own body weight. The atmospheric pressure that humans breathed easily was considered extreme conditions requiring special equipment. The temperature ranges, the weather patterns, the tectonic activity, even the native wildlife. All of it combined to make Earth one of the most hostile inhabited planets the Vrelnath had ever documented. And humans lived there, thrived there, had evolved to not just survive but dominate that nightmare environment. The Vrelnath had politely informed humanity that they were, essentially, too dangerous to join the collective. They had offered to maintain limited communications to share basic scientific data, but had made it clear that humans were not welcome in the greater galactic community. The message had been delivered with diplomatic language, but the meaning was clear. Humanity scared them. Sarah pulled up the translated distress call on her screen. She could ignore it. Earth had no obligations to the Vrelnath, no treaties, no alliances. They had spent 60 years isolated because the galaxy had decided humans were monsters. But as she read the desperate plea for help, Sarah knew she could not simply turn away. She reached for the secure communication line to Terran Command. Within 2 hours, the message had reached Admiral Marcus Webb at the Terran Defense Fleet headquarters on Luna. Webb was a tall man with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat during humanity's expansion into the solar system. He stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the distress signal data, while his senior staff gathered around the conference table. The room was built into lunar bedrock, reinforced and shielded against every threat humanity could imagine. It had been constructed during the dark years after the Vrelnath rejection, when humans had realized they were alone in a potentially hostile universe. Commander James Park from Strategic Operations spoke first. Admiral, this has to be considered carefully. The Vrelnath made their position on humanity very clear. They do not want our help. They probably did not even intend to send this signal to us. It is on an ancient frequency they likely activated by accident. Captain Elena Vasquez from the Diplomatic Corps leaned forward. But that does not change the fact that they are clearly in trouble. The signal indicates they are under attack. If we ignore this, what does that say about us? That we can be just as closed-minded as they were. Webb studied the tactical data. The attack was being carried out by Krell Dominion forces, a species humanity had identified but never directly encountered. Intelligence reports suggested the Krell were expansionist and aggressive, with a military philosophy built around overwhelming force. They had been gradually consuming smaller civilizations along the galactic rim for years. Commander Anna Liu from Intelligence provided additional context. Admiral, our analysis suggests this is not an isolated raid. The Krell have been positioning forces throughout this sector for months. If they take Kepler-9, they will control the primary source of heavy elements needed for hyperspace travel. This could be the opening move in a much larger campaign of conquest. Webb walked to the observation window, looking out at the stark landscape of Luna beyond. He remembered when he was a young officer, watching the news feeds of the Relnath departure. The hope that had turned to disappointment, then to anger, then to grim determination. Humanity had decided that if the galaxy would not accept them, they would become strong enough that it would not matter. They had built warships designed to withstand any threat. They had trained soldiers to fight in any environment. They had turned their isolation into strength. But in doing so, had they also lost something essential? The room fell silent as everyone waited for his decision. Webb turned back to face his officers. The Vrelnath rejected us because they were afraid of what we are, because we come from a world that would kill most species within hours, because we can survive conditions they cannot imagine. They looked at us and saw predators, and maybe they were not entirely wrong. He paused, letting his words sink in. But being a predator is not the same as being a monster. Yes, we are strong. Yes, we can be dangerous, but we are also capable of compassion, of sacrifice, of helping those in need even when they have given us no reason to. If we ignore this call because the Vrelnath rejected us, then we prove that their fears were justified. We become the monsters they always believed we were. Captain Vasquez straightened. What are your orders, Admiral? Webb moved to the tactical display, his fingers pulling up fleet deployment data. We deploy immediately. 15 ships. I want heavy cruisers for combat capability and medical frigates for humanitarian support. We are not going as conquerors or as saviors demanding gratitude. We are going because someone called for help, and we have the ability to answer. Commander Park looked troubled. Admiral, some in the fleet will not be happy about this. There are many who still harbor resentment about our isolation. Webb's expression hardened. Then they can remember what it means to be human. We do not help others because of what we will gain. We do it because it is right. Because when someone is drowning, you pull them out. You do not ask if they deserve it first. Within 6 hours, the Terran Defense Fleet had mobilized. 15 warships gathered in formation near Earth's orbit, their hulls gleaming in the reflected light of the sun. The TDF Indomitable, Admiral Webb's flagship, was a heavy cruiser that exemplified human engineering philosophy. Built to operate in the harsh conditions of the outer solar system, it featured triple-layered armor capable of withstanding meteor strikes, redundant systems for every critical function, and weapons designed to punch through any defense. The human ships were not graceful or elegant like the vessels the Vrelnath built. They were brutal, functional, built by a species that had learned to survive in one of the most hostile environments imaginable. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Webb stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the stars displayed on the view screen. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen had been brought aboard as a communications specialist, given her expertise with alien protocols. She approached the Admiral now, her expression uncertain. Sir, I have been monitoring Vrelnath communications channels. Word of the attack on Kepler-9 has reached their homeworld. Their defense fleet is mobilizing, but they are at least 5 days away, even at maximum hyperspace speed. We can reach the station in 3 days. Webb nodded. Then we may be their only hope. Chen hesitated. Admiral, what if they reject our help? What if we arrive and they tell us to leave? Webb considered the question, then smiled grimly. Then we will save them anyway and deal with their hurt feelings afterward. Sometimes, Lieutenant, you have to do the right thing even when the people you are helping do not appreciate it. Now prepare the fleet for hyperspace jump. Set course for the Kepler sector. As the human fleet engaged their jump drives, reality rippled around them. The ships vanished from Earth orbit, beginning their race across the stars toward a desperate battle. Behind them, humanity held its collective breath, wondering if this moment would change everything or if they were simply rushing toward another rejection. But for Admiral Webb and his crew, the question was simpler. Someone had called for help, and the Deathworlders were coming. Arrival of the storm. The emergency lighting in Kepler 9's command center had taken on a crimson hue, casting everything in the color of blood. Captain Zareth watched the shield integrity display drop another percentage point, knowing that each decline brought them closer to catastrophe. 72 hours had passed since they had sent the distress signal on the universal frequency. 72 hours of constant bombardment, of watching his people suffer and die, of hoping that somehow, impossibly, someone would answer their call. The Krell had been methodical in their destruction. They had taken their time, systematically destroying every defensive capability the station possessed. The automated turrets had been the first to go, picked off with precision strikes. Then the shield generators damaged one by one to weaken the protective barrier. The Krell were not interested in a quick kill. They wanted the station intact, which meant grinding down its defenses until surrender became inevitable. Navigation Officer Telvan's console suddenly chimed with an urgent alert. "Captain, we have 3 evacuation shuttles requesting permission to launch. Families with children. They believe they can reach the gas giant's moon network and hide until help arrives." Zareth felt his heart constrict. He knew what would happen. The Krell commander, a being named Thexral, had made the rules of this engagement abundantly clear. Any ship attempting to leave the station would be destroyed. No exceptions, no mercy. The Krell believed that weakness invited exploitation, and showing compassion to refugees would be considered the greatest weakness of all. But what choice did he have? To deny them even the chance at escape? He opened the communication channel. "Shuttle Bay, this is the captain. Permission granted. May the stars guide your path." The 3 shuttles launched from the station's lower docking port, their small engines burning bright against the darkness of space. For a moment, Zareth allowed himself to hope. Perhaps the Krell would show mercy. Perhaps they would see that these were innocents, families, children who posed no threat. Then the Krell cruiser nearest to the fleeing shuttles opened fire. The plasma weapons were bright blue, almost beautiful in their lethality. The first shuttle vaporized instantly, its shield generators overwhelmed by the sheer power of the blast. The second shuttle managed to deploy emergency defensive measures, but they were designed for asteroid deflection, not military-grade weapons. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds longer. The third shuttle tried to change course to dodge, but the Krell gunner had anticipated the move. The explosion was smaller than the others, but just as final. Zareth closed his eyes, feeling the weight of those deaths settle on his shoulders. 147 souls. Gone. Because he had given them permission to try. Because he had allowed himself to hope. When he opened his eyes, he found his entire bridge crew staring at him, their expressions a mixture of grief and growing despair. "We are going to die here," Communications Officer Lissa said quietly. "There will be no rescue. The collective fleet cannot reach us in time, and no one else is listening to our signal." Zareth wanted to argue, to provide reassurance, but the numbers did not lie. The collective defense fleet was still 4 days away. Kepler 9's shields would fail within the next 6 hours. After that, the Krell would board, and everyone remaining on the station would be killed or enslaved. The Krell did not take prisoners for humanitarian reasons. They took prisoners for labor, and the Vrelnath were not physically suited for the brutal conditions the Krell would impose. His console chimed with an incoming communication request. The identifier made his blood run cold. It was from Thexral himself, the Krell commander who had orchestrated this entire nightmare. Zareth accepted the transmission. The view screen filled with the image of a being that haunted the nightmares of a dozen species. Thexral was massive, even by Krell standards. His exoskeleton was the color of burnished copper, marked with ritual scars that indicated countless victories in battle. 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his face, regarded Zareth with something that might have been amusement. "Captain Zareth of the Vrelnath," Thexral's voice came through the translator as a deep rumble. "Your defenses are broken. Your people are trapped. Your distress signal has gone unanswered. I offer you one final opportunity for mercy. Open your docking ports. Surrender the station. I will allow the survivors to be transported to a prison world rather than executed. This is a generous offer. I suggest you accept." Zareth straightened despite his exhaustion, meeting those alien eyes with as much dignity as he could summon. "The Vrelnath Collective does not bow to conquerors. We may not be warriors, but we are not cowards. If you want this station, You will have to take it from our corpses. Thexrel clicked his mandibles in a gesture that their species used for laughter. So be it. You choose extinction over submission. I respect that even as I condemn you for it. When my warriors board your station, they will show no mercy. The young, the old, the injured, all will fall. Your foolish pride has sealed their fate. The communication cut off. Zareth turned to his crew, seeing his own fear reflected in their faces. Emergency power to shields, he ordered. Engineering teams prepare to repel boarders. I know we are not soldiers, but we will make them pay for every meter they take. If we must die, let us die standing. For the next 4 hours, Kepler-9 fought its final battle. The station's remaining automated defenses were activated, creating a crossfire pattern around the docking ports. Engineering teams rigged explosive charges in the corridors, preparing booby traps for the inevitable boarding parties. Medical personnel moved the wounded to secure locations, knowing it would make no difference but refusing to abandon them. And through it all, the Krell bombardment continued, methodically dismantling the last of the station's shields. When the shields finally failed, the bridge crew barely reacted. They had been expecting it. Zareth watched on his tactical display as Krell boarding craft launched from their cruisers. Dozens of angular pods that looked like shards of broken metal. The pods would latch onto the hull, burn through with plasma cutters, and disgorge their cargo of Krell shock troops. "Captain," Navigation Officer Telvon said, his voice hollow. "It has been an honor serving with you." Zareth was about to respond when something impossible happened. Every console on the bridge suddenly shrieked with priority alerts. The tactical display exploded with new contacts, ships appearing at the edge of the system as if conjured from the void itself. Communications Officer Lisa's hands flew over her controls, her bioluminescent spots flashing in rapid confusion. "Captain, we have multiple hyperspace signatures. 15 ships. No, wait. They are not collective vessels. These ships are not in any of our databases." Zareth moved to her station, studying the sensor data. The new arrivals were massive, larger than the Krell cruisers, with a design philosophy that seemed to prioritize brute functionality over elegance. They were arranged in what military tacticians would call a hammer formation, optimized for breaking through defensive positions through overwhelming force. Whoever these newcomers were, they had arrived ready for war. On the far side of the system, alarms were simultaneously blaring on the Krell flagship. Thexrel studied the new arrivals with a mixture of confusion and growing concern. His tactical officer, a younger Krell named Vexith, manipulated the holographic display to analyze the unknown vessels. "Commander, these ships are unlike anything in our combat databases. Their power signatures are enormous, and their approach vector suggests they are here for us, not the station." Thexrel's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Perhaps the Vrelnath called in reinforcements from an ally we did not know about. "It does not matter. We have 12 warships. They have 15. Numbers are close enough that our superior tactics will prevail. Initiate combat protocols. All ships are to maintain formation and prepare to engage." But even as he gave the orders, Thexrel felt something unfamiliar stirring in his thorax. Uncertainty. Those ships radiated a sense of danger that his combat instincts recognized even if his conscious mind did not. Aboard the TDF, indomitable, Admiral Marcus Webb stood on his bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing the tactical situation. 3 days of hyperspace travel had brought them to Kepler-9 just in time. The station was battered but still intact, and the Krell fleet was in the process of launching boarding operations. Webb had seen the destroyed evacuation shuttles on long-range sensors as they arrived. He had noted them, filed away that information, and felt his jaw tighten. The Krell had just demonstrated what kind of enemy they were. That would inform his strategy going forward. "Communications. Open a channel to the Krell flagship. Let us see if we can end this without further bloodshed." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen worked her console, establishing a connection using standard Krell communication protocols that Earth's intelligence had obtained through careful observation. "Admiral, channel open." The Krell are accepting. Webb nodded, and the view screen shifted to show Thexral's imposing form. The Krell commander studied Webb with undisguised curiosity. "I am Thexral, commander of the Krell 3rd Assault Fleet. Identify yourself and explain why you dare to interfere in our conquest." "Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received a distress signal from this station and have come to render assistance." I am ordering you to cease hostilities immediately and withdraw your forces. Thexrel's mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. Terran, I do not recognize this species or your authority. This sector is claimed by the Krell Dominion. The station is our prize of war. If you wish to avoid destruction, you will leave immediately. Webb's expression did not change. I am not asking, Commander Thexrel. I am telling you. Withdraw your forces or we will remove them. You have 10 minutes to comply. The Krell commander's amusement faded, replaced by something harder. You command 15 ships. I command 12. Our vessels are battle-tested, our warriors experienced in countless conquests. What makes you believe you can make threats to me? Webb glanced at his tactical officer, who nodded confirmation that all weapon systems were primed and ready. Because, Commander, our ships were built on a Deathworld. Our weapons are designed to crack apart asteroids and punch through solar storm radiation. Our armor can withstand impacts that would vaporize your cruisers. And my crew has been waiting 60 years for a chance to show the galaxy what humans can do. You have 10 minutes. The transmission ended. Thexrel stared at the empty view screen, processing what he had just heard. A death world. He knew what that meant. The collective classification system marked the most dangerous habitable planets with that designation. Worlds where the conditions were so extreme that only the most robust species could survive. He had never personally encountered a death world species, but the tactical briefings were clear. Such beings were invariably dangerous, their evolution driven by environments that would kill softer species. He opened a channel to his fleet. All ships battle stations. We are engaging the human fleet. These Deathworlders will learn that the Krell do not flee from threats. Destroy them. The Krell warships turned as one, their weapons ports glowing as they charged for combat. They maintained their standard formation, a pattern that had proven successful in dozens of previous engagements. The plan was simple. Use their superior maneuverability to outflank the human ships, concentrate fire on individual targets, and eliminate them one at a time. It was a strategy that had never failed. Today it failed spectacularly. The human ships did not maneuver for position. They did not try to outflank or create crossfire angles. Instead, they simply accelerated directly toward the Krell fleet, moving faster than Thexrel had thought possible for vessels of their size. The closing speed was so extreme that his tactical officer barely had time to recalculate firing solutions. Weapons free, Webb ordered calmly. Show them why you do not threaten Earth. The human ships opened fire and the void became a storm of destruction. The weapon systems on Terran warships had been developed through decades of operating in one of the most hostile stellar environments in known space. Earth's solar system was a shooting gallery of asteroids, comets, and debris. Ships operating there needed weapons that could vaporize threats quickly and at extreme ranges. The result was a weapons technology that was obscenely overpowered by galactic standards. Railguns accelerated projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Laser arrays designed to cut through asteroid cores carved through Krell armor like paper. Missile salvos equipped with proximity nukes created expanding spheres of annihilation. The first Krell cruiser to die never even understood what hit it. 3 separate railgun rounds struck its command section within milliseconds. The kinetic energy transfer literally tearing the ship apart from the inside. The second cruiser attempted to evade but was caught by a laser barrage that carved through its engine section, leaving it dead in space. The third cruiser managed to return fire, its plasma cannon striking the shields of the TDF Resolute. The human ship's shields flickered but held. The Resolute responded with a full broadside that overwhelmed the Krell ship's defenses and reduced it to molten debris. Thexrel watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. This was not a battle. It was an execution. The Deathworlders had not been boasting. Their weapons were beyond anything the Krell had encountered. And worse, they fought with a cold efficiency that spoke of species that had learned warfare in the harshest possible conditions. Retreat, he ordered, his pride finally breaking under the weight of survival instinct. All ships emergency hyperspace jump. Abort the mission. But even that was denied to him. The human ships had positioned themselves perfectly, cutting off the escape vectors to the hyperspace jump points. 4 more Krell cruisers died trying to break through the human formation. The rest, including Thexrel's flagship, found themselves trapped and surrounded. A communication request came through from the human admiral. Thexrel, his mandibles trembling with suppressed rage and fear, accepted it. Webb's face appeared on the screen, his expression still calm but his eyes cold. Commander Thexrel, you have 2 options. Surrender immediately. and your surviving crew will be treated according to the accepted laws of warfare. Resist further, and we will destroy every ship in your fleet. Choose now." Thexerl looked at his tactical display. 5 ships remained of his once proud fleet. All were damaged. All were surrounded. The humans had not even deployed all their vessels in the engagement. Some of their ships had held back, presumably to guard the station or as reserves. The Deathworlders had crushed his fleet without even trying. "We surrender," Thexerl said quietly, and felt something inside him break. The Krell survivors were transported to secure holding facilities on one of the human support ships. Thexerl watched from a viewport as boarding parties from the TDF deployed to Kepler 9, their powered armor making them look like walking fortresses. He realized with a cold clarity that the Krell Dominion had made a terrible mistake. They had believed themselves the apex predators of this region of space. They had grown arrogant on easy conquests, on victories over species that had no warrior tradition. Now they had encountered something that made them look like prey. As the human Marines entered Kepler 9's damaged docking ports, Captain Zareth stood with the remnants of his crew in the command center, staring at the view screen in disbelief. Communications officer Lissa had managed to translate the final exchange between the human admiral and the Krell commander. The Deathworlders had won. More than won. They had obliterated the Krell fleet in less than 30 minutes of combat. But now came the question that terrified Zareth even more than the Krell invasion had. The humans were here, the species that the Vrelnath Collective had rejected and isolated for 6 decades, the beings from the Deathworld. What would they demand for their rescue? What price would humanity extract for saving those who had once called them monsters? Aftermath and understanding. The human Marines entered Kepler 9's command center with a precision that spoke of extensive training. Their powered armor was unlike anything Captain Zareth had seen before, bulky and intimidating, painted in colors that seemed designed to be visible rather than camouflaged. The lead Marine's helmet retracted with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a woman with dark skin and sharp eyes that quickly assessed every corner of the room. She held a weapon at a ready position, not quite aimed at anyone but clearly prepared for threats. "Captain Zareth of the Vrelnath Collective," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle given the intimidating appearance of her equipment. "I am Sergeant Major Patricia Williams of the Terran Defense Force Marines. Are there any wounded that require immediate medical attention?" Zareth found himself momentarily speechless. He had expected demands, threats, perhaps even retribution for the way the Vrelnath had treated humanity. Instead, the first words from the Deathworlders were an offer of medical help. He gestured to the corner of the command center where 2 crew members lay injured, their bodies damaged by debris from the bombardment. "We have wounded," he managed to say, also throughout the station. "Many injured." Williams nodded and spoke into her communication system. "Medical teams to command center. We have casualties. Multiple teams to Deck 7, 12, and the lower habitat rings." Zareth watched as more humans entered, these ones wearing different armor with medical symbols displayed prominently. They moved immediately to the injured Vrelnath, their movements careful and precise. One of them, a young man with red hair, carefully scanned the injured crew members with a device that hummed softly. "Do not be afraid," the medic said to one of Zareth's wounded officers. "We have studied Vrelnath physiology. We know how to help you." The medic produced what looked like an injection device and pressed it against the injured officer's arm. The Vrelnath gasped as the pain medication took effect, his bioluminescent spots brightening with relief. Zareth felt his legs weaken and he sat heavily in his command chair. The humans were here. The Deathworlders were on his station and they were helping. It did not make sense. Nothing about this situation made sense. Sergeant Williams approached him and Zareth noticed for the first time how tall she was. The Vrelnath averaged about 1.6 meters in height. This human woman stood easily 2 meters tall, and the way she moved suggested a strength that would be devastating in combat. Even without the powered armor, she would be physically superior to any Vrelnath. "Captain," Williams said, her tone professional but not unkind, "Admiral Webb would like to meet with you on the Indomitable at your earliest convenience. We have medical facilities there that are better equipped to handle the most seriously injured from your crew. We also need to discuss the strategic situation. The Krell fleet we engaged was apparently just a scouting force. Our intelligence suggests they have larger assets in the region." Zareth nodded slowly, still processing everything. Yes, of course. I will need to brief him on our situation. How soon can you arrange transport? We have a shuttle standing by. Whenever you are ready, Captain. Within the hour, Zareth found himself aboard a human shuttle accompanied by his senior officers. The craft was smaller than Vrelnath vessels but moved with an aggressive efficiency that reminded him of the warships. The interior was designed for function rather than comfort, with exposed structural supports and equipment secured with what appeared to be excessive redundancy. Everything about human engineering seemed to assume the worst possible conditions. Navigation Officer Telvan sat across from Zareth, his expression troubled. Captain, what if this is some elaborate revenge? What if they saved us only to make demands we cannot refuse? Communications Officer Lissa shook her head. If they wanted revenge, they would not have destroyed the Krell fleet to save us. They could have simply watched us die. No, there is something else happening here. Something I do not understand. The shuttle docked with the Indomitable, and Zareth's first impression of the human flagship was one of overwhelming scale. The docking bay was vast, easily capable of holding dozens of craft. But more striking was the sense of controlled power. Every surface seemed designed for durability. The crew they passed in the corridors moved with a purposeful efficiency, and many of them were simply massive by Vrelnath standards. They were met by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, who introduced herself as the communications specialist, who had first detected their distress signal. She was smaller than most of the humans they had seen, but there was an intensity to her gaze that made Zareth uncomfortable. Captain Zareth, thank you for coming, Chen said. Admiral Webb is waiting in the main briefing room. Before we go, I want you to know that everything you see and hear on this ship is classified. The Vrelnath Collective made it very clear that they wanted minimal contact with humanity. We have respected that. What we share with you now, we share because the situation demands it. Zareth nodded his understanding, though his hearts were beating rapidly. The humans had secrets. Of course they did. Any species that could build warships this powerful would have advanced technology they would want to protect. The briefing room was surprisingly ordinary, with a large table and holographic displays showing tactical information. Admiral Webb stood as they entered, and Zareth was struck by the man's presence. He was not particularly tall by human standards, but there was a weight to him, a sense of command that came from decades of leadership. Captain Zareth, Admiral Webb said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. I am glad we could reach you in time. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Zareth and his officers sat, and the Admiral activated a holographic display showing the Kepler sector. Webb gestured to the map. What you experienced was not an isolated attack. Our intelligence indicates the Krell Dominion has been positioning forces throughout this region for months. The assault on your station was part of a larger offensive. They were testing the Collective's response times and defensive capabilities. Zareth felt his skin go cold. You are saying this is the beginning of an invasion? A full-scale war? The Krell have been expanding their territory for years, but always in small increments, absorbing minor species that could not defend themselves. Now they are preparing to challenge the major powers. Your collective is one of their primary targets. Webb pulled up additional data showing Krell fleet movements and strategic analyses. Your collective defense fleet is strong, but it is designed for peacekeeping and defensive operations. The Krell are specialized in aggressive warfare. If they commit their full resources, your civilization will be in serious danger. Navigation Officer Telvan spoke up, his voice uncertain. Why are you telling us this? Why do you care what happens to the Vrelnath? We rejected you. We called you dangerous. We isolated your entire species because we were afraid. Admiral Webb was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was measured. Yes, you did. 63 years ago, your diplomats came to Earth and declared it a death world. You told us we were too dangerous to join the galactic community. You made it clear that we scared you. He paused, and Zareth saw something complex in the human's eyes. You were not wrong. Earth is a death world. Our gravity would slowly kill most of you. Our weather could be lethal. Even our wildlife is more dangerous than what most species encounter. And yes, that has made us strong in ways that frighten others. But strength and cruelty are not the same thing. Just because we can be dangerous does not mean we choose to be monsters. Communications Officer Lissa leaned forward. Then why did you come? Why risk your ships and your people to save us? Webb smiled slightly. Because someone called for help, and we had the ability to answer. It is really that simple. The Vrelnath may not want us in their collective, But that does not mean we will stand by and watch innocent people die. He gestured to the tactical display. But I will be honest with you. This is bigger than just Kepler-9. The Krell are a threat to the entire sector, including human space. We have been isolated for 6 decades, but we have been watching. We have been building. And we have been preparing for the day when isolation was no longer an option. That day has arrived. Zareth felt the weight of what the Admiral was saying. The humans wanted to help, but they also wanted something. Alliance access to the wider galaxy, an end to their isolation. Could the Vrelnath Collective accept that? Could they overcome 60 years of fear and prejudice? A chime sounded and Sarah Chen checked her console. Admiral, the Vrelnath Council is requesting an emergency quantum link communication. They have learned of the attack and of our intervention. Counselor Mirsha wishes to speak with you directly. Webb nodded. Put it through. The holographic display shifted, showing the face of a Vrelnath who radiated authority. Counselor Mirsha was ancient by their species' standards, her silvery skin marked with the darker patterns that came with age. Her expression was carefully neutral. Admiral Webb of Earth, the Council has been informed of your actions at Kepler-9. We are grateful for your intervention, but we are also confused. The Terran system has been designated a restricted zone by mutual agreement. Your presence in collective space raises significant concerns. Webb met the Counselor's gaze steadily. Counselor, we responded to a distress signal. One of your stations was under attack. We had the capability to help, so we did. As for our presence in your space, we will withdraw as soon as the situation is resolved. We have no territorial ambitions here. Mirsha's expression showed skepticism. Yet you have demonstrated military capabilities far beyond what our intelligence estimated. Your ships destroyed a Krell assault fleet in minutes. This raises questions about what else humanity has been building during your isolation. I will be frank with you, Counselor, Webb said. Yes, we have been building. When the Vrelnath Collective rejected us, we realized we were on our own in a potentially hostile universe. So we prepared. We built ships that could survive any threat. We trained soldiers to fight in any environment. We became strong because strength was our only option for survival. But we did not become cruel. Mirsha was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice thoughtful. The Council will need to discuss this situation. The Krell threat is real and growing. Our intelligence confirms what your analysis suggests. We face a war we may not be equipped to fight. Perhaps the Counselor continued slowly. It is time to reconsider certain decisions. The galaxy has changed in 60 years. The comfortable peace we enjoyed is ending. Maybe we need allies who are strong, even if that strength frightens us. Webb nodded. If the collective wishes to discuss a formal alliance, we are willing. But there must be understanding on both sides. Humanity will not be treated as second-class citizens or kept isolated anymore. If we fight together, we stand together as equals. Mirsha's expression softened slightly. I will convey your position to the Council. In the meantime, Admiral, I am authorizing your fleet to remain in the Kepler sector and assist in the defense of our borders. Consider it a temporary measure while we work out the larger questions. The transmission ended. Zareth looked at Admiral Webb with new understanding. You planned this, he said quietly. You knew that saving us would force the collective to reconsider their position on humanity. Webb shook his head. We came to save lives, Captain. But if it also opens a door that has been closed for too long, I will not apologize for that. Humanity has been alone long enough. Over the next several days, Zareth watched as human and Vrelnath personnel worked together to repair Kepler-9. The differences between the species were stark. The humans were larger, stronger, able to work in conditions that would exhaust most Vrelnath. But they were also careful, patient, and surprisingly gentle when the situation required it. He found himself in the station's observation deck with Sergeant Williams, watching as human engineers worked alongside Vrelnath technicians to replace damaged sections of the hull. Your people are not what I expected, Zareth admitted. We were taught that Deathworld species were aggressive, violent, difficult to control. Williams laughed. Oh, we can be all of those things. Humans are capable of terrible violence when necessary, but we are also capable of incredible compassion. We contain multitudes, Captain. Just because we can break things does not mean that is all we do. She pointed to the viewport where a human engineer was carefully instructing a Vrelnath technician on proper welding techniques. That is Corporal Jackson. He grew up in one of Earth's harshest environments, a place called Alaska, where the winter cold would kill most species in minutes. He is strong enough to bend steel with his bare hands if he wanted to, but right now, He is using that strength to help someone who comes from a world he could never visit without life support. That is what humans are, Captain. Zareth felt something shift in his understanding. Maybe the Vrelnath had been wrong. Not about Earth being dangerous, that was undeniably true, but about what that danger meant. Strong did not have to mean cruel. Dangerous did not have to mean monstrous. Several weeks later, Zareth stood in the reconstructed command center of Kepler-9, watching as the last of the human ships prepared to depart. The Vrelnath Council had made their decision. A formal alliance would be negotiated. Humanity would be invited to join the collective, not as observers or restricted members, but as full partners. It would be a long process with many details to work out, but the door was open. Lieutenant Commander Chen appeared beside him, her expression thoughtful. Strange how things work out, is it not? You sent a distress signal on an old frequency nobody was supposed to be monitoring. The wrong signal to the wrong people at the wrong time. Zareth smiled. Perhaps it was the right signal after all. Maybe the universe was telling us something, that fear and prejudice can blind us to potential allies. That strength without compassion is tyranny, but compassion without strength is merely good intentions. Chen nodded. Admiral Webb has a saying. He claims we should judge people not by what they can do, but by what they choose to do. Humanity can be dangerous, but we chose to help. In the years that followed, the alliance between humanity and the Vrelnath Collective would grow into something remarkable. When the Krell launched their full invasion, they found not a divided collection of peaceful species, but a united front backed by the military might of Earth. The war was brutal, lasting nearly 3 years, but the Krell were eventually pushed back and forced to accept peace terms. Humanity earned its place in the galactic community not through demands or threats, but through sacrifice and courage. The Deathworlders had shown that their greatest strength was not their powerful bodies or their advanced weapons. It was their refusal to become the monsters others feared they might be. Captain Zareth would later write in his memoirs about that day when the human fleet arrived, emerging from hyperspace like an answer to a prayer sent in desperation. He would write about his fear, his confusion, and ultimately his gratitude. But most importantly, he would write about the lesson he learned, that sometimes the scariest thing in the universe is the thing that saves you, and that is not a contradiction. It is simply the truth that strength and compassion are not opposites but partners, each giving meaning to the other. The wrong signal had reached the right people, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.